A couple weeks ago, two Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on my door, a husband and a wife, and after their introductory being friendly, saying they lived in the neighborhood and they wanted to drop by and visit, the husband tried to lead into why they were there by saying to me, "Have you ever had a message that was so important to you that you just wanted other people to hear it?" I looked at him and I said, "Yes, every Sunday when I preach." But I especially feel that way about what I want to try and share with you this morning. Would you pray with me? Lord God, I'm standing here before a church full of people, all of whom struggle with different things in life. Help them hear what you have to say to them, that they might find the best of life and not settle for second best. Amen. There is no question that life is wonderful, a wonderful experience. But life is also filled with trouble. The Bible doesn't deny this. In fact, the Bible is very much upfront about it. In the book of Job, the 5th chapter, it says, "Man is born to trouble. It's a part of life." Or the 14th chapter, "Man that is born of woman is of few days and full of trouble." And certainly nobody knew this better than the Old Testament character Job. But he also knew that life was wonderful. In these days in which you and I are living, we know that life has its troubles. We all have our personal challenges that we face: health problems, job problems, don't have enough time problems, financial stresses, relationship stresses. There are also the problems that our world as a whole faces: terrorism, the renewed threat now again of a nuclear holocaust, a global economic struggle that right now is doing better for the more affluent, but still a challenge for the less affluent. There are cultural and religious clashes, and everywhere people face the problem of time flying by all too fast. If anyone is tempted to think that he or she is the only person that has problems, then you're totally wrong, because everybody has problems. And just wishing that your problems would go away will never make them go away. I once asked a leader of the church what he thought people wanted to know when they came to church on Sunday, and his response was very interesting. He said, "People want to know how they can have a new beginning, a fresh start. They're tired of the same old problems and frustrations and mistakes that don't seem to be getting them anywhere. They want a fresh beginning without all of the headaches." When he said that, I thought to myself, isn't that what Christianity is all about? In the love, the mercy, the forgiveness, the power of God, it's never too late to start anew, to start all over again. But that doesn't mean your troubles will all of a sudden just disappear. In fact, I honestly believe that wouldn't be good for anybody. We don't need some magical escape from our troubles in life. But what it means is, what we do need is the ability to face and cope with the problems we have, and with God's help to overcome them, and to become stronger and wiser because of them. I always say nobody grows spiritually in good times. It's always in the hard times of life that we have the opportunity to grow. You might say there are two kinds of people in life. There are those who master life, and there are those who are mastered by life. The first kind of person develops deep inner resources of spiritual strength and courage and hope, so that in the bright days of life as well as in the dark days of life, they can stand tall and straight and face life squarely and deal victoriously with whatever it is that life might send your way. The second kind of person has no real inner resources of strength. So when the going gets tough in life, they're forever running away or feeling sorry for themselves or giving up or just caving in. What makes the difference? Why do some people cope well in difficult times while others can't cope at all? Always for me, the difference has been one thing: faith. Keeping a strong faith, keeping it strong in the good times so that it will be there when the hard times come, because all of us will face difficult times. Some have it, some don't. It's not hard to tell who's got it and who doesn't, especially when the going gets rough in life. But how do you get that faith? Where does it come from? It comes from knowing what God has taught us about life, especially the whole meaning and purpose of life, what is most important, and then trusting in that and living according to it. But sometimes we need to remind ourselves of what God has to say, to go back and learn those first lessons all over again. Listen to it anew and then start living anew. We need to regain the basics of life, what is really essential, and don't let them get lost in all the non-essentials of life. There's a story in the Old Testament that I think points out in a symbolic way what I'm trying to say, of going back and benefiting from what generations before us have known and how they have coped in life. As Justin read in the 26th chapter of Genesis, we find the story of Isaac, the son of Abraham, and his people. And when Isaac and his people went to live in the land of Gerar, they were in great need of water. It was a very dry, arid desert type land. And without wells of fresh water, there was no way you could survive. But if you had the water, life was rich. Isaac remembered how when he was a boy, he had lived in that same area with his father, and he remembered how his father had dug wells in order to have the fresh water. Since that time, however, long ago, the native people of the land, the Philistines, had filled in those wells with rock and dirt. But Isaac remembered the location of the wells, and so he told his people to start redigging the old wells again. Even though the wells had been filled in, it was still much easier to redig the old ones than to try and dig new ones. Furthermore, the old wells had proven to be good ones with plenty of fresh running water. So it would be foolish to waste time trying to find a new source of water when you knew where a source already was. And so when Isaac and his people redug the old wells, they had plenty of water with which to live. You might say, well, what has that Bible story got to do with our lives today and the problems we face? I think in a symbolic way, it has much to tell us. You might think of the water in those old wells as the living water that Jesus Christ offers to us. And although times may change and the living water gets buried under a lot of other stuff like those old wells, the source is still there. The troubles in life are still the same, and the way to cope with them is still available to us if we're willing to go back and find it. People of all generations suffer the same problems: pressure, stress, anxiety, the inability to get along with others, worry, fear, loneliness, frustration, depression, sickness, sorrow. You know the list. You face a lot of it yourself. And not only do the problems remain the same, but the solutions to those problems are the same. And sometimes we just get too modern for our own good. What we need today is not some magical escape from our troubles in life. That's not going to happen. But we need to rediscover the basic truths of our Christian faith and the basic way of life taught to us by the Bible, by the church, by God, to see that just as it gave strength and the ability to cope to our grandparents and our forebears, it can do the same for us today. And that's what I mean by redigging the old wells in a spiritual way. We need to rediscover the old-time religion, not all the trappings that went with it necessarily, but the basic message of the gospel on which that old-time religion was based, the religious faith and strength that our predecessors had before us. And when we do that, then we can get a whole new beginning in life and start all over again. In other words, what people are looking for and needing today is the same thing that Jesus Christ brought into this world 2,000 years ago. We just need to rediscover it to find our meaning and our purpose in life. And either we can learn from the past, or we can try and reinvent the wheel like we so often do, and then we have to learn through the school of hard knocks and a lot of pain that we don't necessarily have to go through. So what are some of those spiritual treasures of the past that we can rediscover if we're willing to redig those old wells? Wisdom and truth about life that will help us do better with our troubles today. With the time we have left, I would like to share just a few examples of what I think are some of the more important treasures we need to rediscover. Of course, all of this, to me, is laid out clearly for us in the Scriptures. But for one thing, we need to rediscover this joy and the stability of home and family life, because that's one of life's great blessings and treasures, but it has become buried under so much stuff over the last 2 or 3 decades. It needs to be rediscovered again today. And the effect on home and family life is true in every economic level of life, every social level. The rich and the poor alike face that same problem. But to discover the meaning of home and family just doesn't happen. It has to be worked at. It has to be developed on a day-to-day basis. A house does not make a home, no matter how big or how little that house might be. A wedding ceremony does not make a marriage. The birth of children does not make a family. Only constant effort and dedication will bring these things into being. So husbands and wives need to learn first and foremost of all to love each other, because that's how you will love your children best. Parents need to get their priorities straight. And one of those priorities should be their children. Because to me, when you choose to bring children into this world, you are committing yourself to putting those children first, ahead of yourself, for at least the next 15 to 20 years. Another treasure that's long been buried under the rubble of modern society is that we need to rediscover a sense of pride. And by that, I don't mean the puffed up, egocentric, conceited kind of pride that's disgusting to God, but the kind of pride that gives you self-respect, a feeling of self-worth, a sense of security and purpose in life. Jesus said we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. We need to learn to do a better job of loving ourselves. And that means a right sense of personal self-worth, realizing that we are special in God's sight, coming to know what it really means to be loved more than anything else. Before we can ever love our neighbor, we've got to love ourselves. When we don't know how to love ourselves, where does it lead us? A polarized society, because we can't love others if we don't love ourselves. A lot of struggle and frustration and anger and angst A lot of that stems back to the inability to love ourselves, because only then can we get along with others. Still, another treasure that needs to be rediscovered today is that of enjoying life rather than just enduring it. And I think the growing drug crisis in our society is a prime example, among other things, of how people no longer know how to find meaning and joy in life. Yeah, we've got problems. People have always had problems. But our joys and our blessings in life are much greater, and we will see and feel it if we'll just look for the positive rather than just always being controlled by the negative. We will enjoy life better if we take time to slow down, to relax, to rest, rather than just always working ourselves into exhaustion or going here and there and everywhere until we have no energy left. Take time to be with your family and your friends, because you're not going to have family and friends if you don't take that time. And take care of yourself. Again, it goes back to loving yourself. Take care of yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually. We need to rediscover the things of the Spirit, or what I would call the wells of living water. Paul describes them in Corinthians as the fruit of the Spirit, in Galatians 5:22, of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. How many of us could honestly say that we don't need more help with those things? And then, of course, there's the greatest treasure of all, and that is love itself, agape love I'm talking about. People today need to relearn how to love, or maybe some need to learn for the first time how to love God, how to love themselves, and how to love others. And that is the mandate that Jesus gave us. We need to relearn how to do it. Love is so important that we're told without love we have nothing. Without love we are nothing. And so many people struggle with personal relationships today. Doesn't anybody get it? When we forget or neglect the basic values and beliefs and practices that give life meaning, then we face all the struggles we have today. Same thing's true in our country. When we forget or neglect or drift away from the basic values that made this country one in which we love to live, then we end up with the problems that we're facing today. When we fail to redig the old wells, to open and let the flow, the truth that's in them, then we face things like the opioid crisis and the depression rate and the suicide rate and our inability to get along with each other, our polarized society. And it keeps getting worse and worse. And it's not going to stop until we decide to go back and redig those old wells. Kind of like our city of Nashville that is growing so fast, and everybody loves the positive things that comes with the growth. But then you always hear now and then, but we don't want to lose what it is that made us love Nashville. We don't want to lose civility and kindness and what I would call good old Southern hospitality. We don't want to lose those values, because where does life go then? I want to close this morning with a story that I hope you'll talk about at lunch today and try and figure out what is the meaning for life in this particular story. It's a story about a man that wanted to buy a bird, parakeet, that could sing and talk to him. He didn't know anything about birds, so he went to the pet store and talked to the owner about it, and the owner sold him a bird for $140. He took the bird home, and the very next day he came back to the pet shop, and he said, "I don't understand. The bird doesn't sing or talk at all. It just sits there." And the store owner said, "Well, that's kind of strange. Does he ring his little bell?" And the man said, "What bell?" "I don't have a bell. So the owner sold him a little bell for $10. The next day, the man came back to the shop. The bird still won't sing or talk. And the owner said, well, does he climb his little ladder? The man said, what little ladder? Oh, you need to have a ladder. The bird needs to get exercise, because when he gets exercise, it'll feel better, and then it'll really sing and talk. So the man bought a little ladder for $20. The next day, he came back with the same complaint. Does he look at himself in his little mirror? The owner said. He sees himself in the mirror and he thinks it's another bird, and so he talks and sings to it. So the man bought a little mirror for $25. The next day, the same thing happened, and the store owner sold him a little swing. On the sixth day, the man came back to the pet shop with a sad look on his face, and he shouted, my bird is dead. What do you mean it's dead? Said the shop owner. He's dead. I know a dead bird when I see one. He turned up his little feet to glory. He's just lying there on his back as dead as can be. The store owner said, well, did he ever sing? Did he ever talk? Oh, yes, the man said. You'd have been proud of him. The last day I took the cover off his cage. He went right over and he pecked at his little bell. He hopped on his little ladder. He looked in his little mirror. He swung back and forth on his little swing. And then finally, just before he toppled off and died, he looked up at me, and with a pained expression, he said, don't you have a little bird seed? I think that story is a parable about life for a lot of people. We surround ourselves with a lot of trinkets, but we neglect that which is essential for life. Well, no, we don't neglect food because we actually eat too well. But what we neglect is what I would call the manna from heaven, the bread of life, our spiritual feeding. We need to rediscover those old treasures. We need to redig those old spiritual wells if we want to cope with the problems that we're all going to face in this world. And if we want to feel like our lives really matter.